the animals that needed the horses, and he was a blacksmith.
Yeah.
And the house was said to have been caught fire by one of his jobs he was doing. And the house was not destroyed, but it was damaged. And so when it was repaired, they added on another L to the house. So when you come down Andrews Street and go up around the corner, you have two ways. You can go down to Lanes Cove or up Lanesford Street towards Ranters Market in that direction. Down to Lanes Cove, I could see Lanes Cove from my bedroom window, so I grew up loving Lanes Cove like everybody that lived in Lanesville. And my best friend, Ellie Stefanio, is sitting in the audience. Ellie, please raise your hand. And Ellie and her family, her mother was Anna, and she was a nurse, and her father, Edward, was a Greyhound bus driver before and became a lobster. What did they call his job? He would meet the fish vessels on the deck, and they would unload. A lumper. Yeah, and he was Big Ed. Everybody knew about Big Ed and his 5 beautiful daughters. And Ellie was my best friend, and how we met in the 1st grade at Lane School. She was actually in the 2nd grade, and I was in the 1st. Is we both wore Margaret O'Brien dresses that day. Do you remember that, Ellie? And then for the rest of growing up in Lanesville, it was just a place you wanted to be. People used to call us the Back of the Woods group. And when the API Andrew Bridge was suddenly made in the 50s, they would ask, have you been over the bridge?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so my memories of Lanesville are much the same as Carol's. Eva Fox, across the street from Lanes Cove School, that's where you went to get your penny candy all the time. And then Santi's, down the street on the main road is where you got your Huaraches to wear every summer. Those shoes that squeak. And my mother always used to say, if your shoes squeak by the end of the summer, that means they weren't paid for. I don't know where that came from. On my dad's side, my grandmother, her name was Elena Sagatti Caruso. And Elena came from Italy as a young woman, and she was born in San Giorgio, Italy. And there is where she met and married my grandfather, who was Eugene John Baruso, also born in Italy. And they came to America by way of, and this is the story we were told, John Hayes Hammond Jr., I think is how it's referred to, went and he wanted a group of men to come to work the quarries in Lanesville and in other places. So he brought them over, a group of Italian quarry workers. And that's what they were doing when they lived in Italy. When they came to Lanesville, where he housed them first, in some sort of a house that was near Folly Cove Point, is where my grandmother cooked for the quarry workers that were assigned to the Bayview Station, where it now is the reference that Wally gave us for the Boston Marine Center, University Marine Center. There was a huge company there that they exported lobsters all over the world. And all the lobstermen who did side work, they were quarry workers, but they all had lobster boats, and they would bring their lobsters to that building, and they would be housed in barrels that were made actually in Gloucester by a barrel company located on Maplewood Avenue. If some of you remember the Smiths family, they owned that barrel company, and they provided the barrels that they would put the lobsters in. So there were lots and lots of lobstermen that did lobstering as a side job, and my grandfather Eugene was one of them. So Elena and Eugene had 2 boys and 4 girls, all of which were born and brought up here on Cape Ann. and worked various places employed on Cape Ann. And as a young girl growing up, my biggest impression, was of our Cloverleaf Girl Scout troop. Pauline Pistomer was our group leader, and we were the first Girl Scout troop in Lanesville. And there were other troops in Cape Ann and the other parts of Gloucester. But Pauline was our group leader, and we had wonderful membership. Both of my colleagues here were members, and I'm sure they'll remember our assignments to the patrols. We had Patrol 1, Patrol 2, Patrol 3, and Patrol 4. And as a Girl Scout troop, we were assigned to make baskets to be sent to Europe during World War II. And we also sold first Girl Scout cookies. Do you remember? And you still see people coming. Right, we sold Girl Scout cookies. And then Pauline would put us in her little jalopy and drive us to some place that was wooded in West Gloucester. And I can't remember, do you remember that?
Yes. Campground.
The campground in West Gloucester. And she would pick us up at our houses and bring us there for our Girl Scout camp. And we had a wonderful time. We learned to make pot holders and ladybugs and a lot of things. Do you remember that? But it was a wonderful place to grow up, and I was talking to my friend Ellie just the other day, and she said, you know, do you remember, Bev, we didn't need to leave Lanesville. We had everything. We had our own drugstore, we had our own group doctors, we had Dr. Carville, Dr. Rowley, we had, remember Dr. Bree, he was our first. He thumbed from California to be here on his wife's birthday. He thumbed when he was discharged from the United States Navy. He was a Navy surgeon. He ended up being the chief of the Eye and Ear facility at Mass General Hospital. And I was their first babysitter. They brought me everywhere in their Studebaker. And I just loved it. And Dr. Jedry, who recently passed, Dr. Jedry used to mow their lawn, and I used to take care of their kids. And they loved blueberry cake, so we would always make sure they had a blueberry cake. But beside that, growing up in Lanesville, Ellie reminded me that we had everything. And I remember telling Ellie, do you remember the time that you and I got hired for our first job in high school in the summer, and we didn't want to babysit anymore? And she had a friend, Bobby Ritzy, whose uncle owned some sort of a fish business on the state fish pier. So he said if we promised to be on time and did the work that was required, that we could each have a job. So down we went. I don't think we rode our bikes, Ellie, I don't remember that, or we got a bus. But we would be there, and the women that were packing those fish boxes, they were like zipping through, and Ellie and I were like picking up a fish. Throwing it down. Then the next fish would come by, and I'd look at Ellie and I'd fish, and cutting it and throwing it aside. And then finally Ellie said to me, I can't do this. I said, I can't either. And she said, let's put the boxes under the crate that we're standing on. So it looked like we were packing, we had to pack so many boxes. So here we were folding the boxes and standing down and stuffing them on. And didn't one of the foremen